It would be nearly impossible to overstate Japan's influence on the video game medium. Japan has dominated the console and handheld market since the 80s, along with creating many of the medium's most influential games. There is really only one area Japan's influence hasn't appeared to have much of a direct impact, and that's the realm of PC gaming. These days, Japan pays little heed to gaming on PC. While things have gotten better over the last decade, with Japanese developers usually willing to port most high-profile games to the platform, this is usually to cater to Western markets due to the small number of PC gamers that exist within their own country. But this ultimately begs the question, why don't the Japanese like PC gaming? To start, you might be surprised to find this wasn't always the case. There was a time where the Japanese PC gaming market would begin to rival even Nintendo's market dominance. We have NEC to thank for that.
NEC.
NEC, or Nippon Electronic Company, was a company that dominated Japanese computing during the 80s and 90s. They would come to mass popularity thanks to their PC-88 and PC-98 brands of 8, 16, and 32-bit computers. Similarly to the West, these computers weren't at first originally purchased as game devices. After all, many of these would sell for the equivalent to over $1,000 American dollars each. Instead, people would buy these computers for work purposes and slowly start devoting more and more of their time to gaming. And like their Western counterpart, PC gaming in Japan allowed for gaming experiences that simply couldn't be found elsewhere. Due to the system's ability to hold far more memory than consoles of the time, many of PC-98's most popular games were story-focused and sold themselves on gorgeous visuals. To this day, I find the graphical style of PC-98 games to be mesmerizing. Nothing before or since really ever captures this specific aesthetic. Just take a look for yourself. Even many of the system's more action-focused games manage to use the hardware to make amazing-looking 2D art. Given this, it's likely understandable why a lot of JRPG companies got their start making PC-98 games. For example, before their fame for Final Fantasy, Square designed their first games on this system due to the hardware power required to create the story-rich games they were designing. Aside from JRPGs, we also have games like the original Touhou's being made on this system, and the original Metal Gear games being made on a competing Japanese system, the MSX. Besides just hardware advantages, PC gaming in Japan had another advantage over consoles of the time, and that was of less restrictions. As you likely already know, Nintendo markets itself as a family company, and that was no different back when they and Sega dominated the console market. This is likely why adult themes were extremely common in PC-98 games. Nearly every PC game had some form of fan service at the time. Even when the games weren't visual novels, it was customary to have some adult fan service as a reward to the players between levels. This likely wouldn't have been able to fly in the West, even if the ESRB didn't exist at the time. And if you're wondering why you haven't heard of any of these games during the 80s and 90s, well, it isn't necessarily because of the fan service. In actuality, it's because of the differences in compatibility between Japanese and Western hardware. While IBM and Apple were duking it out to take control of the West, Japan's NEC dominance meant that there would be little to no compatibility between Japanese and Western PC games. Basically, these two industries existed in their own bubble. Sadly, the Japanese bubble was bound to burst. PC standardization was bound to take hold, with the popularity of Windows in the mid to late 90s focusing their optimization on competing systems. The PC-98 series of computers stopped being economical for businesses. As its sales declined, most Japanese game developers jumped ship to consoles, thus ending the golden age of Nippon PC gaming. That might sound like the beginning and end of it, but that definitely doesn't explain everything. After all, personal computers are more popular than they ever were in the 90s, both in Japan and worldwide. If anything, PC gaming should be more popular in Japan than before, right? Well, there are a few problems Japanese PC gaming has faced since the decline of the PC-98 series. For one, NEC computers happened to die right when consoles were really taking off. Sure, console gaming was pretty big in the late 80s and early 90s. Heck, even NEC had their own popular console during those times, the confusingly named PC Engine. But it was the insanely popular PlayStation 1 that really made console gaming reach the mainstream popularity we see today. The PlayStation 1 and 2 both single-handedly sold more units than Sega and Nintendo's last attempts combined. Why learn coding from the ground up to make PC games for Windows when the PlayStation is becoming more popular than the entirety of Japanese PC gaming up until that point? And unlike the PC-98, a PlayStation game could be sold worldwide. On top of all of that, the major advantage PC gaming had over console gaming, their increased memory, stopped being a factor thanks to the console CD disk drives taking hold, allowing for far more data to be stored than the previous generations. You also have to take the nationality of the corporations into account. It might at first sound odd, but the fact that Sony and Nintendo are Japanese companies compared to American IBM or most Windows PCs is important. People prefer to buy products produced in their own country. After all, the Xbox to this day is a brand that sells mostly in the United States, and doesn't sell at all in Japan. Corporations have an easier time marketing their goods and being accepted by their own country of origin. So when you have two large gaming corporations housed in your very own country, the influence they're going to have on you is going to be huge. Definitely more so than can be said for a foreign company thousands of miles away that doesn't see you as their target demographic. Finally, you have to take simple cultural differences into account. While PCs have become more common in Japan, due to Japan's higher average age, adoption of new technology is sometimes slower in the East than the West. Fax machines are still a common sight in Japanese businesses as an example, meaning that owning a PC wasn't as necessary as it was quickly becoming in the States. But as far as cultural differences go, I think the biggest hurdle modern PC gaming faces in Japan is that of portability. Home consoles aren't actually the most popular form of gaming in Japan. Handheld and mobile gaming are. Playing games on the go and with friends in person is the most common form of gaming in Japan. Large PCs, on the other hand, are the exact opposite of portable. It's no wonder that the only form of PC gaming that is still somewhat popular in Japan are visual novels and adult games. Games you'd want to play alone in your room. There's also the fact that buying high-end PC parts in Japan tends to be more expensive than in the States. So while Japan's PC gaming today might not come close to the popularity of consoles in Japan, don't think it wasn't influential. Its freedom allowed developers of the past to influence the gaming landscape of Japan today, and was the start of many of the country's most famous titles. And hey, just because these modern challenges exist, that doesn't mean PC gaming has no future for the Japanese. As stated before, thanks to the popularity of digital distribution sites like Steam, Japan has been learning to pay some respect to the medium. Developers know they can get easy sales by porting their games to these systems, and on top of that, Steam has allowed native PC-made visual novels to see sales numbers in the West that were originally unheard of. PC gaming's effect on the Japanese market can be seen as a sudden yet huge source of revenue. For example, SNK thank King of Fighter 13's PC sales as a major reason they decided to get back into making fighting games. This increase in attention has also seemed to have an effect on Japanese gamers as well, with internet gaming cafes, something normally seen in Korea and China, becoming more popular in Japan over the years. And according to Famitsu, a popular Japanese gaming site, PC gaming has shown explosive growth over the past few years in Japan. While this relatively recent attention began as a way for Japanese developers to get more money from Western audiences, now that PC gaming is becoming filled with Japanese games, it makes sense that a lot more Japanese gamers would be curious about the platform. I'll end with saying that while I can't exactly predict what the future holds for Japan's growing PC market, I will say it's looking brighter than it has in decades. For the first time, the two separate bubbles are converging, and I'm excited to see the effect Japan will have on the industry. On a different note, my longtime subscribers may have noticed the Nichegamer logo at the start of the video. Yes, I've partnered with them. It may at first sound ironic for me to partner with a gaming website when I just made a video criticizing game journalism, but there's a reason for this. This actually wasn't the first time a site or organization has asked me to partner with them, but I feel a site like Nichegamer contains an audience that would be more receptive to the niche things I like to make videos on. It's in the name after all. What does this mean if you're a subscriber? Well, more content made at a higher rate, as in no more 4-month hiatuses. Sorry about that. I really like the idea of being a part of a community that talks about games in a more critical way than what you see the mainstream media discuss. It's honestly the old dead sites similar to Nichegamer that got me into making videos to begin with. For those that aren't subscribed and are watching this video on YouTube or Nichegamer, well, I have never actually asked people to subscribe to my channel before. I personally find it patronizing when I hear someone else suggest it. Because, hey, I think I know if I like someone's content or not, right? But hey, give some of my other videos a look and let me know what you think. If all goes well, my next video should be up within 7 days of this one at the latest. Until then, see ya.